All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys so much for being here. I got a pretty interesting episode coming up for you guys today. It's going to be a bit different from our regularly scheduled program. Today, I'm going to be discussing all the recent drama that has occurred over the past 4 or 5 days in regards to a gentleman by the name of Vrillium. Now, I don't know if it's Vrillium or Vrillium. Be that as it may, this fallout that has blown up on social media has forced me to think about this right wing media ecosystem and the thoughts that I have about it. And I would say generally, I do have somewhat of a more, I guess, right leaning or conservative disposition, but I also do have some, I guess, idealistic values as well. I don't want to be too narrow minded. I want to be open minded. I want to be able to moderate conflict. I don't believe everything is about power and domination and survival. I think that there are higher goods in life worth aspiring to that transcend these kinds of base concerns. But I would say that I am a more right leaning individual. Maybe I have some left leaning tendencies as well. But the reason I wanted to talk about this particular matter was because it calls into question the legitimacy of this right wing ecosystem. Because it does seem as if there is no moral hygiene, there are no standards. And I guess I'll give you guys a bit of context on Vrillium or whoever this guy is. So Vrillium, his real name is William Sexton, and I guess he's contracted with Rift TV. If you go to his YouTube channel, you'll see the little Rift TV logo um, on his content, and we'll look at some of his videos in a second, but I just want to briefly touch on this. So he does this whole America First Groiper adjacent LARP. Maybe it's sincere, maybe it's not. But a lot of his content is focused on anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, anti-mass migration stuff. It's a bit reactionary, and he's also a Orthodox Christian conservative. So that's his whole shtick. It's very Groiper. It's very America First coded. And there's actually a video of him uh, being shared on social media from, I want to say, a week or two ago during the Young Republicans conference in New York. And he was out there and he was meeting with Sneeko, this guy named Woman Propaganda. He's big on X as well, but he shook hands with Nick Fuentes and they exchanged kind words. So they're kind of a part of this, loose coalition, this loose faction of more reactionary, nationalist leaning right wingers that are different from the MAGA or even the neoconservative base that has been dominating politics for the better part of 10 years. So he's in that milieu, he's in that sphere. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because on the surface, it may seem as if this is a topic that is superficial or shallow. It's a topic that doesn't have a lot of depth, doesn't have a lot of substance. But I think if you actually peel back the onion and you go under the hood and you see everything that is in this right wing ecosystem and the structural incentives and the grifting and how much shape shifting is going on and how much people bite off of more popular right wing figures like Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson, you begin to realize that a lot of this is very fraudulent, a lot of it is very fake, a lot of it is very performative. And that's the reason I wanted to talk about this. So, obviously, well, I guess we can go back before 2023, before Elon Musk ever acquired Twitter. So, around the early 2010s, between 2010 and 2015, the left had essentially, and this was during Obama's administration, but the left had essentially secured control of all the major institutions: academia, the news media, Hollywood, entertainment. So they completely took over our cultural institutions, and they even took over Silicon Valley and big tech as well. I'm sure you guys can remember there was like the Apple logos with the pride flag on it, all of that sort of stuff. So the left basically took over all the major cultural institutions. And This was still at a time when there was a lot of censorship, there was still a bit of gatekeeping on YouTube, there was a lot of barriers to entry, especially in conservative politics. And for a long time, even going back before 2015, if you wanted to get into right wing or conservative politics, you needed credentials. You needed to get licensed to go on the air. You needed a degree to get a job at a think tank. You needed some kind of writing prowess to start a blog or to work at some publication. If you wanted to write for a magazine, if you wanted to be on the news media, if you wanted to work for, say, Fox News, if you wanted to write books, these sorts of things. You had to have some kind of expertise. You needed credentials if you really wanted to be taken serious in right wing media. Now, fast forward to the Obama years and everything that happened around that time. The right lost control over all of our cultural institutions. And what happened basically after that was Trump rose to power and he basically called out the left wing media. He said they were fake news. He called out woke. He called out, um, all this political correctness. And he basically trailblazed a brand new path for all these right wingers to come out and be more unapologetic about their views. Now, at this time, it was still very controversial to be a Trump supporter. It was still very controversial. It was still very frowned upon. The left had way more capture of the culture at this time than they do today, especially today, by a wide degree. But with Trump's rise came a serious decline in standards. And that's why at this time you had people like Ben Shapiro who were very anti Trump. And a lot of people at this time were very anti Trump. Michael Medved was very anti Trump. For a brief period of time, Hugh Hewitt was anti Trump. I think even Matt Walsh was a bit anti Trump at this time. So the right wing did not take kindly to Trump's rise because they saw him as violating basic institutional norms, violating political correctness, violating civility politics. He offended people's conscience, and he would say things that most people at that time found to be beyond the pale. He would say things back then that were only mildly racist. And today, at least in online politics, they would basically be seen as normal, totally acceptable, because the Overton window has shifted so much further to the right since Elon Musk acquired Twitter. So, after Trump took over, after the Trump revolution, all of the right wing media were basically forced to capitulate to Trump. They didn't have the will to resist him, and they saw him as being the only real bludgeon against the left. The neocons couldn't stop the left. The boomers, the traditional conservatives, they couldn't stop the left. They didn't have the appeal. They couldn't appeal to the younger generations. They didn't have this aesthetic. They didn't have this energy that was associated with their movement the same way it was with the left. People like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, they didn't have that kind of push. They didn't have that kind of pull. So they had to rely on Trump. And Trump, unlike all these other neoconservatives, had energy. He had pull. He was magnetic and he was a charismatic figure. And the entire news media apparatus and all these neoconservative or ex neoconservative publications and many of the media outlets had to capitulate to Trump because the Trump effect was real. You could feel it. It was revolutionary. It was a major cultural change. And him winning marked the beginning of a new era. So the entire conservative party basically rallied behind Trump. And it was to the degree that even when Trump was running in 2020 and people wanted to put, candidates like DeSantis against him or Nikki Haley or all these other sorts of people, they couldn't do it. They couldn't pull it off because nobody had the same pull that Trump did. Trump had the culture, Trump had the people. So it's undeniable that Trump basically revolutionized the party. And even if there's still swamp creatures in the establishment even if you still have deep state bureaucrats and all these sorts of people who are associated with Trump and are associated with this current administration, there is no question, it is undeniable that Trump has the people. He has the people, he has the support, he has the culture. All these swamp creatures don't. Nobody likes rhinos. Nobody likes John Thune. Nobody likes any of these Republicans in the Senate and the House. They're reptilians. They're swamp creatures. They have no energy. And people see them as being a part of the institutional rot that Trump came in to basically scrub out. So Trump basically paved a brand new path for people to be more unfiltered, more reactionary. And that is why today we have the culture that we have. People are a lot more reactionary now. People are a lot more provocative and inflammatory now because Trump basically collapsed all those standards, which allowed for the rise of people like a Nick Fuentes and more reactionary types. So in 2023, when Elon Musk acquired Twitter and he basically democratized political engagement, anybody could say anything. Free speech became the norm. You could get away with saying racial slurs. You could get away with posting porn on the platform, all sorts of things. And this really benefited the right wing. Because prior to that, if you guys remember what Twitter was like before, Twitter was a lot more censored. If you guys recall, Trump got deplatformed from Twitter. Babylon Bee got deplatformed from Twitter. Jordan Peterson got banned off of Twitter. And this was around 2021, 2022, before Elon Musk acquired Twitter and really opened it up for people to be a lot more radical. Now you have people talking about white genocide openly, talking about total remigration, posting Hitler edits. So the culture has completely changed. And with that, the Overton window has moved further to the right. But here's the problem. Because there are no barriers anymore, because standards and expectations about what is and isn't accepted within the right-wing movement, because Trump created this huge tent and let basically anybody in, that was the only filter. The only filter is, do you hate the left? Do you hate the mainstream media? Do you hate Trump's enemies? If you do, you're welcome in the Trump movement. There was no standards. There was no purity testing. So they would let anybody into the movement as long as they pledged fealty to Trump and to MAGA. And what inevitably happened was they ended up letting in all these troglodytes, all these grifters, all these opportunists, all this corruption because there was no filters. And now it's become endemic in right-wing politics, and it's become endemic in the Trump administration. And just think about some of the people. You have people like Candace Owens, people like Lauren Southern, you have people like Jack Posobiec, Laura Loomer, open grifters. Steve Bannon, who pled guilty for defrauding people to the tune of millions earlier this year in a campaign where he raised money to fund the wall, and those funds were never allocated properly. He pled guilty to that earlier this year. So this movement is full of grifters, it's full of opportunists, it's full of scammers. There are no standards. And the right wing now, because of what Trump has done, will associate with anybody and justify anybody's behavior as long as it benefits Trump or the right wing movement. It has nothing to do with ideology. It has nothing to do with strategic objectives. It's all about what is in Trump's best interest. That's why now he's attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, because they're not loyal to him. The entire party revolves around what's best for Trump, what works for Trump. So with the rise of all this grifting and with the rise of all this reactionary red pill content going back to 2021 and the democratization of political engagement on social media, you had people like Andrew Tate come to the fore, Open conspiracy theorists like Candace Owens are now very popular on the right. Nick Fuentes has ascended. And now he's more popular than basically everybody in the right-wing movement. Maybe with the exception of Tucker Carlson, but he might even be more popular than him at this point. I don't know, but he's close. He's certainly more popular than Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles, at least online. And because this America First faction has become so popular, you have a lot of people who are biting off of the Nick Fuentes flow, biting off of his style. People like Vrillium, people like Myron Gaines, and there's plenty of others. Lily Gaddis, Sarah Stock, Kai Schwirmer. A lot of people are basically biting off of Nick Fuentes' whole flow to gain popularity and notoriety. None of these people are really that intelligent. They're not deep thinkers. They're somewhat charismatic, and they're good in like a back and forth sparring session, this jab session in regards to, you know, quick, witty remarks in a informal debate setting. But in a truly structured debate where you have to lay out a coherent argument, I don't think these people could stand up to scrutiny. I don't think they could do it. Like a true Lincoln Douglas style debate, I think they would collapse under pressure. Because, like I said, it's all about the quips, it's all about the remarks, it's all about what is clippable on social media. Because the standards have basically collapsed, there is no gatekeeping institutionally, there is no gatekeeping with higher academia or who can or can't have a voice in the conservative movement. Anybody gets a voice now. And this is just a natural consequence of everything that has transpired in the past 10 years since Trump took over. So, as this relates to Vrillium, here's where we get into him. So, like I said earlier, he works with Rift TV. I believe he's contracted by them. And he has his own YouTube channel. He posts a lot of short form content on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. And a lot of his content now, it's just reactionary slop. He criticizes Jews, AIPAC, Israel, blacks, Indians, feminism. And we'll go through some of his clips here, but the reason I find a guy like him so peculiar and so interesting is for this specific reason. And by the way, let me pull up some images of Vrillium from not too long ago. I'm going to switch tabs here. So this is an image of the man in question. This is what he looks like. So as you can see, he's wearing some kind of crop top here that says Internet Princess. It's pink. Clearly it's for a woman. He's wearing this burgundy skirt and he's got on fishnets. And to make matters worse, he has on makeup. So that's him a few years ago. And then this is him in 2023. You can see him in this photo. In the backdrop, you see saints. He's in some kind of cathedral or some kind of church. And this is him right here. This is from 2 years ago, from 2023. And as you can see, he's got short hair now. And he looks like a proper choir boy. But the transition is truly remarkable. And it can't be overstated. And this really calls into question, are any of these people legitimate? Are any of these people serious actors? Or is it all just a grift? Is it all just vibes based? Here's another video of him. This is from 3 or 4 years ago. I don't want to play the audio. I don't care to hear it. But you can see here, let me turn off the audio. This is him on his bed with his long hair and his vape pen on his chest, thirst trapping on the internet. There's plenty of other videos too. There's nudes of this guy on the internet. Obviously, I'm not going to show that because I don't want this video to get struck. But a few years ago, this guy used to be a total degenerate, leftist, gender fluid, transsexual. He was a complete product of the woke movement. And now, as the Overton window has shifted further to the right, now he is this based, orthodox Christian conservative alpha male who doesn't like Indians, doesn't like Jews, doesn't like blacks, doesn't want them in his country, wants them to get the fuck out, all this sort of stuff. And of course, that's his prerogative. He's entitled to those opinions. It's a democracy. He can say what he wants. It's protected under the First Amendment. And those are his opinions. But it calls into question, is it authentic? Is it real? Or is it just a product of where the vibe is now? Because how do you go from being a gender fluid, queer, pansexual, tranny, crossdresser 3 or 4 years ago to a base reactionary Christian conservative? How does that work? How do you do a complete 180 like that? It's seriously perplexing. And to me, and look, I'm not saying it's impossible. It can happen. It's plausible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you have to seriously question, how sincere is it? How authentic is it? Is it rooted in deep conviction, or is it just you felt ashamed, or you have urges that you want to repress, and now you want to feel accepted by society, so you become a completely different archetype so that it's easier to score social acceptance? I don't know. I don't understand, like, what motivates this kind of transition. It's a serious question. Because this transformation, this level of reversal, this complete 180, it is truly unprecedented. And the fact that it's all being done online makes me even more skeptical. But the reason why I say this is because it's one thing to have deeply held convictions about morality, about right and wrong, about objective truth, about your vision for the world, about your own identity, and to kind of fluctuate, but within certain parameters, within certain guardrails. And those guardrails are protected by your own identity, your own sense of self, your own worldview, your own morals, your own values, to kind of change who you are or change your opinions in a sense, but without losing those core values or without losing that real sense of self. That can happen. You can fluctuate, you can change your beliefs or your perspectives or adopt new ideas within the parameters established by your beliefs or your worldview or your sense of self. That makes sense. For example, I consider myself to be somewhat liberal, but I also consider myself to be a nationalist. And I ask myself, how do these positions contradict, or how can I synergize these two potentially contradictory worldviews to create something more coherent, to create something more concrete, and to create something more logically and internally consistent? That's one thing, but that doesn't violate my basic worldview. That doesn't violate my basic appreciation of right and wrong. That doesn't violate my sense of self. Because me changing or synergizing my positions on liberalism versus nationalism doesn't do anything to uproot or deracinate my views on the world or my sense of self or my beliefs on right and wrong and morality. It's a completely separate question. What he's doing here is completely turning his back on what he was to become something different. He used to be a Marxist. He used to be a communist. He used to believe that gender was a social construct. He used to be gender fluid. He used to be a transsexual. He used to be attracted to all genders. He used to hit on black femmes. There's DMs of that. And now we're supposed to believe in that just a short span of 2 to 3 years, he has really made an authentic transition from the complete opposite side of the political spectrum to now the other extreme of the political spectrum, which is as a based, orthodox, Christian reactionary. who has a contract with Rift TV making white nationalist talking points. That level of 180ing needs to be scrutinized. And here's the reason why this is so important. I'm not just going on about this for no reason. I'm going somewhere with this. What is happening to the conservative movement? You can't even really call it conservative anymore. What is happening to this right-wing coalition right now is indicative of moral and spiritual rot. That's what this is. And I don't want to sound preachy. I really just want to explain what we're seeing here, this phenomenon. When your movement gets captured by grifters, by LARPers, by these red pill manosphere types, by people who are constantly transgressing norms, constantly transgressing the boundaries on right and wrong, constantly escalating, constantly shifting the Overton window, constantly downplaying their own radicalism. When that is what your movement becomes and you let in just anybody, your movement begins to rot from within. It loses its internal consistency. It loses its moral hygiene. It loses its character. That's why now you have Candace Owens accusing Erica Kirk of killing her husband and doing ad reads on those videos. That's why you have Candace Owens making content with Nick Fuentes and all these other online figures and putting it behind a paywall. That's why you have Steve Bannon defrauding his own donors. That's why you have Trump rug pulling his own supporters on a shitcoin and doubling his net worth. That's why you have TPUSA taking money from every billionaire and the pro-Israel lobby and all these other lobbying groups to repeat their talking points. That's why you have Andrew Tate telling people to sign up for Tate University to basically scam his own audience. That's why you have Nick Fuentes demeaning his own audience and treating them like pay pigs while doing nothing really to benefit their lives. It's very opportunistic. It's very cynical. And at one point, there was intellectual and moral standards on the right. At one point, there was intellectual and moral and editorial standards, but those things are gone now. And nobody's willing to hold each other accountable because now that's considered deplatforming. Now that's considered leftist tactic. So now anybody can come in. Fascists, Nazis, white nationalists, Catholic integralists, all sorts of reactionary figures. And there is no way of actually filtering them out because everybody's inside the tent. It's like, you cannot, just because you are trying to, I'm trying to think of an analogy here, but you should never cut off your nose to spite your face. Like, you should not be so preoccupied with fighting the left and defeating the left that you'll let anybody take over the right. Long term, that is a terrible idea. It's a suicidal idea. You can't kick snakes out of the rooster house only to let foxes in. You know what I mean? It's one of those sorts of things. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but you guys get what I'm saying. And the reason why this is a problem is because, look, maybe on the surface, Nick Fuentes and Vrillium and Angry Patriot and Myron Gaines and Andrew Tate and Candace Owens, maybe deep down, all of them are based. And maybe they're pushing everybody in the right direction and they're moving the Overton window. Okay. Maybe that's a legitimate argument. But the problem is, When everybody is grifting, when there is no moral hygiene or moral standards, when there is no baseline agreements within the right wing on basically anything, and it's just constant infighting and factionalism, and anybody can come in, grifters, conspiracy theorists, opportunists, and there's no way of filtering anybody out because it's called canceling, or you're called woke for doing that. What inevitably happens is you incentivize all the wrong people to come in. All the clout chasers, all the grifters, all the conspiracy theorists, and then all that baggage gets tied to your movement. Anybody who is moderately right wing, anybody who is moderately conservative, now has all that baggage tied to them because they were allowed into the coalition. And long term, that hampers the movement. And on top of that, let's say hypothetically Andrew Tate turned out to be not who he says he is. Let's say he didn't really own a Bugatti. Let's say he wasn't really this tough alpha male. Let's say secretly he was getting pegged by one of his escorts, and this got exposed to the internet. Imagine how that would look. You can't be somebody who advocates discipline, advocates restraint, advocates prudence, and then simultaneously not embody those traits yourself. And what this does is if there is no way of removing these people or canceling these people or enforcing any kind of punishment on people who are dishonest and mislead people and encourage them to adopt a lifestyle that they themselves don't live, what inevitably happens is everybody is going to start doing that. Everybody is going to be interested in their own short-term, rational self-interest for acquiring money. And the other problem that occurs when your movement gets hijacked by these political actors is that your movement loses its coherence. Your movement is no longer coherent. Like, what is the conservative movement? What is the right-wing movement at this point? Is it white nationalist? Is it fascist? Is it Christian nationalist? Is it conservative? Is it paleocon? Is it civic nationalist? What is it? Is it theocratic fascist? Is it post-liberal? Is it authoritarian? We don't know. Your movement becomes incoherent. Literally, it becomes incoherent. Nobody knows what it stands for. What are your objectives? What are your long-term goals? Or is it just this big grift for anybody with a mildly right-wing worldview to come in and loot and pillage and grift off of by taking the conservative or taking the right-wing label and trying to monetize it in the name of conservatism, in the name of advancing right-wing values? It's like not everybody should be able to have access to that title. You shouldn't be able to say I'm conservative or I'm right wing and then abuse that label for your own selfish ends. There has to be standards. You have to say, this is what the right wing is. This is what we believe in. You have to gatekeep. You have to filter people out, or else it becomes corrupted and it destroys itself and it turns into this Frankenstein monster, which is what we're seeing now with all these different factions. And we'll get into that in a second because the factionalism here is important on a more substantive and deeper level. But the reason I wanted to talk about this was twofold. One, to talk about this online algorithm, this culture war machine, but two, to talk about the factions. But just to round this out, I just think it's like you can't have a movement where the leaders of it are cynical or dishonest or ironic. Because then what happens is that's what the audience becomes. The audience becomes full of edgelords, people who are addicted to outrage, not people who are productive, not people who want to build, not people who want to, create institutions. You have this very online, hyper ironic edgelord audience that cannot function or understand arguments outside their own bubble. They have no principles. And Without principles, without consistency or continuity, your movement basically has no grounding. It's all about grievance. It's all about humiliating your enemies, attacking the left. It's all about owning the libs. It's all about this base ritual. And like, maybe that can work short term. Maybe it works in the algorithm. It's very clippable. But what is the substance? What is the overarching goal? What is your plan on improving the human condition? These kinds of fundamental questions. Say what you want about conservatives, at least on some level, they were interested in those things. They were interested in improving the human condition. George Bush did at one point, we're talking about George W. Bush, George Bush Jr., at one point talked about some kind of initiative to increase home ownership for blacks and Latinos. And conservatives today would think that's completely woke. But that's what the conservative movement was not even 20 years ago, or a little over 20 years ago. And what is it now? It's irony poisoned. It's grievance motivated. It's full of conspiracy theorists and white nationalists and, yes, fascists. And I feel comfortable saying that because there is a lot of fascists in the movement. And we have completely filtered out the sincere believers. Those people are now viewed as cringe. They're viewed with skepticism. Sincere believers, intellectuals, principled types, you know, they're no longer as memeable. They don't have the same appeal. So to round this out, the thing with a guy like Vrillium is it's this simple. It's not complicated. Vrillium is representative of a rot. That's what he is. I don't even care about him. He's not that interesting. Like, he's not funny. He's not handsome. And the reason why I say handsome is because, aesthetics and appearance is important in media. But he's not interesting. He's not handsome. He's not funny. He's really not that funny. He's not charismatic. He's not that intelligent. He's not that well read. He's not that learned. Well, he's kind of intelligent. I'll give him his credit. But like, he's not a remarkably impressive person in any way. Yet he was able to garner 6,000 subscribers on YouTube, a contract with Rift TV, and tens of thousands of followers on X and Instagram, and I think even TikTok, by basically regurgitating Nick Fuentes' talking points about Israel and Jews and Indians. And it turns out that this guy is not who he says he is. I don't believe he is who he says he is, or at least I'm very skeptical. I'm sure that transition is possible, but when internet clout gets mixed in, I question how genuine it is and who these people really are. And like I said, he's just a symptom of the rot. With the right now, there are all these structural incentives to do what motivates the algorithm, what helps the algorithm, what boosts your clout, what gets your clout up, what gets your attention up, what gets likes, what gets views. And on some level, everybody, myself included, is kind of a victim of this, but I at least try to be principled. I try to be rational. I try to be prudent. I try to be honest. I am committed to quality ideas and improving the human condition and being realistic and being pragmatic. But I also care about views. You know what I mean? It's YouTube, naturally. It makes sense. But that's different from just selling out to the audience and pushing a certain ideology and spoon feeding and sandblasting your audience with certain views. That is just completely vapid. But with all these structural incentives, because of how the algorithm works, the way it is now is, let's take a clip of a black person or a minority or a liberal saying or doing something stupid. Let's react to it in shock and awe. Let's talk about how this means the downfall of Western civilization or the death of our society. Pretend to be angered and shocked and horrified by it. tell us that this is the end of the world, then publish it, let the algorithm do its thing, let the likes roll in, try to amass a large following, and then monetize yourself doing culture war slop. And that's why we see all this infighting now, because there are no honest actors. A lot of these people are fake. Milo Yiannopoulos is talking about Nick Fuentes being gay. He's talking about Benny Johnson being gay. Who knows if it's true? I don't know. I don't care. But it's the fact that there's even all this drama and all these rumors to begin with. Who is the pillar of the movement? Where is it going? What even is it? It's Milo Yiannopoulos, it's Dave Rubin, it's Tucker Carlson, it's Candace Owens, it's Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes. Like, where is it going? Where is the consistency? Where are the standards? And you will have some factionalism on some level, but what we're seeing here is a complete breakdown due to internal inconsistencies and lack of principles and lack of standards. So he's just the symptom of the rot. But when videos like what I just described to you, this fake outrage, this culture war slop, when that is what dominates the algorithm, all it does is motivate other people to put out the same kind of content. No analysis, no depth, nothing interesting. All this like rage bait, low IQ rage bait, 20-second, 30-second, 60-second clips. And next thing you know, that comes to define your movement. Your movement is defined by clips. Your movement is defined by this reactionary algorithm, feeding the algorithm, because that's who dominates now. Not the magazines or the books or the think tanks or the institutions or the intellectuals. It's the algorithm. The algorithm speaks for the right-wing movement, at least nowadays. At least with the left, they have video essays. You know, it's like you kind of got to sit there and watch the whole thing and take it all in. But, you know, this movement is becoming very vapid. It's breaking down. That's why a little bit of gatekeeping is necessary. There's more reward for doing what Ray Valentina or Andre Williams or Vrillium or Angry Patriot or Lily Gaddis or Myron Gaines. There's more currency. There's more reward for doing what they do, which is very low IQ culture war slop, as opposed to doing what a Sam Huntington does, or a Yuval Levin does, or a Azar Gott does, or a Patrick Deneen or an Adrian Vermeule does. These are conservative right-wing thinkers who I actually respect, who actually have good ideas, ideas that I can actually consume and internalize, interesting and fresh perspectives. People who write on Substack, people who write books, who work in institutions. They're right-wing, but they're actually admirable in a sense. You know, a lot of this online populist hard right slop, it's not conducive to long-term success. It's just not. That's why there's so much drama, endless drama. And because there is no standards, because it is so personality driven, you have Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson beefing with each other in public, and Nick Fuentes going at all these people, going at Dave Smith, going at Ben Shapiro, going at Charlie Kirk, going at Michael Knowles, going at Candace Owens, going at Tucker Carlson, trying to basically destroy everybody in the right wing movement so that he can be ascendant. He is the number one personality, because there is no incentive for teamwork in this model when it's so personality driven. Therefore, the movement gets captured by various competing personalities, various competing factions, and there is no glue that holds any of it together. And then what happens is you get people who come in that are edgelord trolls that really aren't interested in serious political activity, supporting the enemy, supporting Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, are you serious over JD Vance? Are you high? Who on earth is supporting Gavin Newsom over JD Vance? That's crazy, especially if you're on the right. And this is how it all ends, you know? That's why standards and professionalism is so important. These sorts of things should be these sorts of things should be handled behind the scenes. These sorts of beefs, these sorts of conflicts, and I'm not even going to put all of it on Fuentes because Tucker Carlson did attack him. But it's petty from Tucker Carlson as well, but these sorts of things should be handled behind closed doors. If you're serious about the movement, if you care about the movement, if you care about winning and beating the left, you should work with people who you have more in common with against people you have nothing in common with who want to destroy you. Why would you ever support Gavin Newsom? That's the enemy's candidate. It's craziness. And only in the machinations of their own mind would they understand it. Maybe they're being facetious. I don't know. But be that as it may, these are the sorts of things that should be handled behind the scenes. And all of these people, because there is no standards for professionalism, because there is no gatekeeping, because now the gatekeepers are the podcasts. It's PBD, it's Joe Rogan, it's the Dave Smith podcast, it's Trigonometry, it's Steven Crowder, all these different platforms, Tucker Carlson's podcast, Candace Owens. If you have a platform, if you have, which is now kind of a institution in and of itself, if you have a kind of platform, which is kind of like a micro institution, everybody in the right-wing movement needs to gatekeep those things. It is important to do that because they're powerful and they have mainstream visibility. Once you get people like PBD, and various other people in the right wing, Alex Jones, and there's a bunch of other people, Dinesh D'Souza. Once you start to take Nick Fuentes seriously and you bring him into the fold and you start talking to him on a mainstream platform, you're giving him legitimacy. You're giving him credibility because that's what mainstream visibility confers on someone. Normalcy, credibility. These ideas are now acceptable. This is what happens when there's no gatekeeping. Your movement gets infiltrated. Anyways, now that we have discussed Vrillium and, the general degradation of discourse on the right wing, I want to get into some of the reactions to all the drama surrounding a lot of the stuff that was exposed about this particular gentleman. So I want to show you guys some tweets. This is one that I saw from Richard Spencer earlier. He says here, pretending to be a woman was more plausible than pretending to be a Russian Orthodox traditionalist. And it's like so true. He says, I almost want to take down this post because piling on people for personal failings is mean. We're all flawed. That said, there is something bigger at play. It might have to do with Vrillium's personality and maybe Gen Z in general. Identity is a LARP performed on the internet. Look at me, I'm a hot baddie and part of this edgy new trend of changing genders. Now look at me, I'm a based ortho bro and part of this edgy new trend of hating the Jews. Where will he go next? Who is the real William? Was the transsexual closer to the real self than the anti-Semitic monk? And it's like, absolutely. Like, who is this person? What do they really believe? Who are they deep down? Is it all just for internet points? Is it all just for the meme? Is it all just for the attention? You have to be very aware and very scrupulous of these kinds of characters and whether or not these people are even genuine because they will destroy the long-term integrity of your movement and they will incentivize inauthenticity and dishonesty, which is obviously morally corrosive. So anyways, I'm going to react to some of his clips. I'll let you guys hear what he has to say, give you guys a better idea of who this guy is.
Why is India so dirty? We love to make jokes about the Indian subcontinent and all their cities being like disgusting. I completely understand. I make those jokes too. That's how I have like any form of Twitter following. But it begs the question, like how does this actually happen? Here's the thing. The caste system. The caste system was established thousands of years ago and explicitly put the darkest of people at the bottom. And those people were responsible responsible for cleaning up the garbage. Problem is, after like 10,000 years of mixing, now nobody like really fully knows where they go. Like no one's gonna stand up and be like, hello, I'm part of.
So, making fun of India, it's a pretty important
You wanna know
staple
why I'm
of
racist? My generation of white
the
Americans
Groyper
were
movement.
told that the last 80 years were a problem. People who looked like us, that lived like us, they were the problem, and that we all
White men are the
needed to
perpetual
get
victims of
past
society.
racism together, and that if we could pull it off, if we could get past racism, if we could learn to live in a colorblind society, that things would be better for all of us. And so we were the first generation raised with a truly post-racial mindset. And as we started to reach adulthood, we walked out, put our hand forward to shake the hands of every other race, of every other group, of every.
Yeah, because that definitely happened as he's explaining it. They definitely weren't calling for Obama to be impeached. They definitely weren't saying Obama's not an American. He's a Marxist plant, a communist. He wants to establish death panels to kill your grandma. Yeah, they definitely weren't saying any of that, or that he shouldn't be president and that it wasn't motivated at all by transgressing racial norms. Yeah, definitely we're living in a post-racial society, right, William? That's definitely a correct narrative.
If you're a young person and you can't afford to live
What a
here, then
joke.
maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real
Reacting to
thing.
this
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro clip from Trigonometry, which obviously this clip was horrible. It was a terrible clip. It was terrible what he said here. But it is taken out of context. And on top of that, Vrillium is reacting to this because it got a lot of outrage on social media and because Nick Fuentes reacted to it. So, reacting to a Ben Shapiro clip.
It's a scarcity economy, boys. There is a limited amount of resources. Every dollar that's in your pocket is a dollar that's not in theirs. You think the people who got on a plane and flew like 48 hours or came on a boat or the back of a donkey solely for money, you think those people are not aware of how our economy works? They try to paint this portrait that like an all-white board of executives or an all-white Harvard club, that this is white supremacy, that those individuals believe in every way that people who are not white are not human. That's absurd. That's absurd.
I don't know who
The
ever has
existence of
argued that.
people who actually think like that is probably 0.0000001% of our population. That's not a natural sentiment.
It's ironic that he says that because his boss, Elijah Schaffer, the guy who runs Rift TV, literally said black people are not Americans because at one point in time they were 3/5 of a human being. So it is ironic to hear him say that.
Folks,
As if like dehumanizing non-whites is not something that's happened historically, but okay. I'm not saying that's how it is today, but like be a little bit more self-aware.
It's GI Robot, MCU moment. We are having the MAGA Civil War. People are calling it the MAGA Civil War, but I don't even think you can appropriately call it that. MAGA Civil War would imply that it's MAGA and then it's two factions split apart, but that's not what it is. There's MAGA, meaning Make America Great Again, and then there's Israel. KIGA, Keep Israel Great Again. Don't let them fool you. I mean, when you look at an individual like Shabbos Kestenbaum, a registered Democrat, social liberal, when you see him go to a Republican event as someone who is not Republican and not MAGA, holding a sign that says Tucker Carlson is not MAGA, it should scream to you, which one of those two guys is the MAGA?
That is pretty funny.
This country is our birthright.
He's right about that.
Yours. The response the past few days to the Tucker and Nick interview has been nothing short of appalling. If you are a young man in America, you should be nothing but completely appalled and disgusted. You see these seething, duly loyal animals like Mark Levin and Shabbos Kestenbaum and Ben Shapiro
So
talking
Jews.
about our movement, our country. I'm sorry, what country is that? Tel Aviv's that way.
Okay, so telling Jews to leave the country. Another right-wing talking point. Oh, so based. Tell the Jews to leave the country. So based. Okay.
Wang half winter soon upon us.
Oh my God, he's even using Nick Fuentes' slogans. Wang half. Yeah, Nick Fuentes coined that. And he's even got the America First flag right here, cropped into the photo.
We have the top 5 Wang half moments. Bro, you knew this one was coming. We have the fucking moon landing. Oh God. What What other group would even think about landing on the moon? And
Okay, so glazing white people. That's fine. You can do a little bit of white people glazing. I'm cool with it. But that's kind of like what he does, you know.
this Indian political party drinks cow urine.
Making fun of Indians again.
How about you just get out? I don't need my children competing with your children. You were not supposed to be here. Do you guys remember the
Okay, so telling brown people to leave the country.
Christmas crash out from Vivek Ramaswamy? That I don't think I could have asked for a better Christmas gift. Because what that crash out did was wake people up to a very clear reality that needs to be discussed. These foreigners see us as an economic opportunity.
Okay, so Vivek Ramaswamy, I guess, is a foreigner now.
Want to see our country reduced even further into an economic opportunity. He says Americans are lazy.
There is some truth to that.
Work. Americans can't compete with us Indians. I don't want Americans to compete with Indians. Like, no, I want my kids to play sports. I want them to enjoy the life that they have in the country that my ancestors built them. I don't want them.
The country that my ancestors built. You know, it's so funny when people say that. The idea that Europe was built by your ancestors or America was built by your ancestors literally flies in the face of reality. Most of the people who built Western civilization were like feudal lords, aristocrats, which made up like 5% of the population. The vast majority of people were serfs or peasants who died at like 20 or 30. So what exactly were your ancestors building? Please help me understand that. Your ancestors built America? What did they build? They settled some fucking shantytown? Is that what they built? They built a fucking water well? They built a fucking wooden fence? I mean, that's an accomplishment on a personal level and in terms of passing down generational wealth, but to say my ancestors built this civilization, my ancestors built this country? What? Really? So your ancestors built the whole country? Your ancestors? I'm supposed to believe that? You mean your ancestors built one home in one particular town and then stayed there and didn't scale it and passed it down over several generations? Your ancestors built this country. When people say that, I just like, it's just ridiculous. It's just such a stupid line.
Competing for baseline economic opportunities with Raj and other gutter bloods from the third world.
Okay, so we're gonna feign outrage about the third world. Typical.
And I've heard these liberals and these leftists, these idiots, oh, well, it's to serve imperialism, man. What imperialism? We don't own any of these countries. Syria's leader, Jelani, is former Al-Qaeda.
Okay, so it's like we haven't heard that 1,000 times. Oh, Syria's president is a former terrorist. Yeah, we know this.
Former ISIS. Literally an enemy of
And
our
that
state.
stupid
That's
ass
an
sound
actual-
effect.
Actual organizations that did not like us. He works for Israel. They're trying to give him like the Zelensky treatment and like paint him up as this, new great rebel leader. But no, he was part of Al-Qaeda. So why do we do it? Let's get to the root of the problem. America has been tribalized, okay? People are operating in the best interests of their own tribe. It's exactly what Pat Buchanan was writing about, 30 years ago. It is absolutely apparent in Jewish Zionists in America. Literally, they won't even deny it. Ben Shapiro has said several times the reason he likes America is because America fights for Israel. And if America stopped fighting for Israel, I guarantee you he'd pack up and leave.
Okay, I don't know what that was.
You can't try to argue that this is a culture that we can live around. Like, we can't.
Okay, so black fatigue. Once again, culture war.
Setting aside how egregiously offensive this was, it speaks to a truth that
I'm getting kind of tired of this. Like he's not that
Look at
impressive.
Ilhan Omar and all of her Somali.
Okay, we got to get Ilhan Omar deported, making fun of
Yeah, we're here to
Somalians.
remember my friend and mentor, Charlie Kirk.
You say your friend. Talk to me about how you knew Charlie and your personal relationship.
This is so unbelievably shameless. It's like not even funny. What's his name? It's like Brylan
Why is he holding his mic like that?
Hollyhand.
And why is he like doing all these like weird movements? Like what is this?
It's like he's an industry plant. He's a GOP industry plant.
Yeah, no shit. So are all of these people. They're all industry plants. Charlie Kirk was an industry plant. Candace Owens, Cam Higbee, Brylan Hollyhan, they're all industry plants. Yeah, no shit. Great fucking observation. You gotta see what I'm saying? Like, this guy is not that intelligent. He's not that impressive. He's not remarkable. He's not even funny. It'd be different if he was funny. He's not even funny at all. And, it's just. So anyways, you guys get the idea. He's grifting off of all of Nick Fuentes' talking points. It's honestly tiresome. Genuinely, it's tiresome. So, that's my opinion. That's my take on this guy. Good riddance. Thank God he got exposed. Who knows? Maybe Rift TV will keep him. Maybe they'll drop him. We'll see. But does anybody find that inspiring? Does anybody find that interesting? Does anybody find that to be entertaining? Like being entertained by these stupid ass 40-second, 50-second, 60-second shorts using regurgitated America First Groyper talking points? Really? Okay. Yeah, no, I think we're better off without him in the right-wing space. Thank God. So anyways, that is Vrillium. The next thing I wanted to move on to kind of give you guys some insight on the context that this drama is taking place in, which is this infighting taking place on the far right or the hard right. Now, for those of you who are not already familiar, there are several factions competing for control of the right wing in the post-Trump era. And you can basically describe those four factions in the following ways. You have the Claremonters, you have the post-liberals, you have the national conservatives, and then you have the hard right. Now, we'll get to the hard right in a second because the hard right has direct implications on everything that has unfolded in the past few days with Vrillium. So we'll touch on that. But before we do, I want to give you guys some insight on this post-Trump right-wing intellectual movement that is gaining popularity. So we're going to start with the first faction, which is the Claremonters. So the Claremonters obviously come from the Claremont Institute, and they take a lot of their ideas from Harry Jaffa and Leo Strauss. Leo Strauss is a classical political philosopher who believes that modernity is where everything went awry in Western society. And by modernity, he doesn't mean the scientific method or technological progress or automation, but he means a lot of the moral relativism and a lot of the Marxist philosophy that emerged due to modernism. And so Leo Strauss has a philosophy that's very grounded in natural rights. He believes that rights are innate, they are not relative, and they are not granted to you by the state. They are just inherent. He also believes that morality is objective. There is no relativism as far as morality is concerned. And he believes that that way of thinking kind of lends itself to nihilism, which is very true when you think about it. When there is no emphasis on virtue or justice or honor or altruism, and those things are not seen as objectively good, it incentivizes people to be more hedonistic or Machiavellian because they believe that morals are relative. So anyways, the Claremonters get a lot of their ideas from Leo Strauss and Harry Jaffa, and their basic ideology is constitutional nationalism. They want to return to a more Republican form of government. They want a society that's run by elites. They want to purge a lot of the progressives and bureaucrats in the institutions. They want to return to a more traditional American paradigm. And so that's the Claremonters. They kind of want to return to a more constitutional form of government. They want to expand executive powers. They want to reduce the influence of federal agencies and unelected bureaucrats. And they want originalists to be in the judicial branch as opposed to more modernist judges who make rulings based on a lot of interpretations and modern values as opposed to the way the Constitution was originally interpreted. And so those are the Claremonters. Then you have the post-liberals. The post-liberals are like Catholics, Catholic integralists, people like Adrian Vermeule, Patrick Deneen, these guys. By the way, these guys have a major influence on J.D. Vance. Patrick Deneen has photos with J.D. Vance, so he takes a lot of his ideas from him. And the post-liberals, what they want to do is they want to completely reorient society towards what they perceive to be the moral good as understood in the Christian tradition. So they want to do things like endorse Christianity in public institutions. They want to repeal recognition of same-sex marriage, ensure that schools provide moral as well as educational instruction. They want to create usury laws to prevent abusive loaning. They want to restrict speech that corrodes social harmony, which actually is a violation of the First Amendment. But they do believe that the Constitution is insufficient to ensure moral and social order. But of course, this is potentially a violation of basic United States principles. But that's a separate point. So they want to restrict any kind of speech that they see as disturbing social harmony. Of course, they want to restrict media and entertainment that promotes liberal and hedonistic lifestyles. They want to create stronger labor rights, enforce price controls on essential goods, ban sex work, strengthen enforcement on obscenity laws. They want to limit technology and AI if it doesn't support the common good, and they want to ensure corporations recognize labor councils. So they want to completely reorient society using state power to achieve a moral and prosperous nation. You know, even if it's done undemocratically. So those are kind of the post-liberals. Then you have the national conservatives, the NatCons. Now, the NatCons are people like J.D. Vance, Carl Schmitt, or not Carl Schmitt, Eric Schmitt, Yoram Hazony. These are your national conservative types. And national conservatives are basically just anti-woke nationalists. That's what these guys are. They want to restrict free trade. They want to make assimilation a prerequisite for citizenship. They're very anti-multiculturalism. They want to impose tariffs on strategic imports. They want to subsidize domestic manufacturing. They want to ban foreign ownership of critical infrastructure. They want to increase immigration requirements. They want to cap immigration at a lower number, build a wall, break up monopolies, restrict asylum seeking, and create a national development bank. And the National Development Bank is basically like a sovereign wealth fund. It's what they have in the Gulf and in Saudi Arabia. And the National Development Bank would basically reserve funds to do infrastructure projects here in the United States to make the country more beautiful, to improve public transportation, to improve utilities, improve infrastructure, those sorts of things. So the goal with the national conservatives is to kind of promote policies that create a unified nation. They want a dominant, cohesive culture and a national government that is subordinated to goals that are intended to advance the interests of the nation, effectively. And the idea here is basically to create a national culture that is centered around white Western norms. They want to valorize the founders. They want to fight against progressive education, celebrate the founding myths of the country. They want to decentralize colonialism and slavery in American history. And of course, promote Judeo-Christian values. So there's that. So those are the NatCons, national conservatives. Then you have the hard right. Now, the hard right is kind of an amalgamation of various factions. It's not really a cohesive collective. You have neo-Nazis, white nationalists, Christian nationalists, white supremacists, fascists, accelerationists. There's all kinds of people in the far right, neo-pagans, all kinds of people. But the two dominant factions really would be America First and the BAP network or the Raw Egg Nationalist Network. Now, the BAP and the Raw Egg Nationalist Network are at odds, and they've been in this head-to-head rivalry with the America Firsters for a long time. The BAP and the Raw Egg Nationalist Network are Nietzscheans. Many of them are pagan. They're anti-Christian. They're very pro-elite, very pro-elitist, and they consider themselves vitalists. So they believe that society should be dominated by the strongest, the most vital, the people who possess the most life force, whatever the hell that means. They think the most beautiful, they think the most charismatic, the most elite, they should be the ones dominating society, and that the powerful should be, or rather, the powerful should subordinate and dominate the weak, and that they should be unrestrained by law, unrestrained by norms, and unrestrained by any kind of morality, and that they should be the ones that drive civilization and drive society forward while basically disregarding the input of the masses. And of course, what's interesting about the BAP and Rag Nationalist Network, the guys who push all this stuff, Curtis Yarvin is also a part of this group, Captive Dreamer. What's interesting about all these guys is they're heavily clicked in with Silicon Valley. They're heavily clicked in with Peter Thiel, with J.D. Vance. They're heavily clicked in with Palmer Luckey, David Sachs. And it's like, of course, it's a match made in heaven. If you have a group of people who are pseudo-intellectuals that are Nietzschean and believe that the strong and the elite should dominate the masses, of course, naturally, the billionaires and the oligarchs will see themselves as being a part of the elite. And they think that they should be unrestrained by morality, unrestrained by law, unrestrained by liberal democracy to basically be able to do whatever the hell they want. So it's a match made in heaven. You got these pseudo-intellectuals who have these books and these blog posts, and Curtis Yarvin is kind of the mascot of all this, that are basically working hand and foot with the Silicon Valley elites to push and traffic their Nietzschean ideology, this elitist, vitalist ideology, onto the masses. And it's like, of course, Peter Thiel wants to be able to do whatever he wants and not be restrained by law or be able to circumnavigate the law. Of course, Elon Musk and of course, David Sachs want that. And so that's kind of the BAP-Rag Nationalist Network. They're very anti-Christian. They're very anti-Nick Fuentes. And I'll get into that in a second, because that's actually very important, understanding why they have beef with Nick Fuentes. Then on the opposite side, you have the America First Groyper Coalition. These guys are, well, many of them are Christian. Most of them are Christian. It is a Christian movement, but they're also white nationalists. And the reason why I say that, a lot of these guys are scared of that term, which I think is very sad. But basically, they believe that the United States government should remain a majority white country in order to preserve its European heritage. And the goal of the America First ideology is to ensure the continuation of basically white political domination over our nation's culture and politics, whilst simultaneously creating a Christian moral order. And in terms of policy, these are some of the things that I think that they would generally support. I mean, the Overton window can keep going further to the right. The Overton window can go anywhere. You can normalize just about anything nowadays, if it lands the right way and if you deliver it properly. But some of the policies I believe these Christian nationalists and these America First white nationalists would support would be things like ending non-white immigration to America, creating quotas for European immigration, banning cultural or religious practices seen as incongruent with Christianity in the West, like Hindu or the construction of mosques. They would close the refugee and asylum system for non-whites. They would obviously violate the First Amendment in the process, but that's a separate point. They would end the diversity visa lottery system. They would create a social order, excuse me. They create a social order that is hostile towards interracial marriage, remove teaching of multicultural Black American and Native American history in favor of a pro-Western or pro-European curriculum, restrict adoption of non-whites to white families and vice versa, subsidize fertility programs like direct cash payments, tax credits, subsidize childcare, and subsidize housing for white families only, that only white families could apply for, kind of like the way it was during the Jim Crow era. So that is the America First nationalist, this white nationalist, Christian movement. So those are the two major factions, the BAP, Nietzschean, pro-elitist, vitalist network that's clicked in with Zionists and clicked in with Silicon Valley, who believe that liberal democracy is gay and that elites should run society. And then you have this cold is killing me. And then you have Nick Fuentes, the America First, Groyper faction of the right, which it's populist, it's nationalist, it's motivated by grievance and resentment, and it's very identitarian. So these are kind of the two major factions that are going head to head. And these are the two major hard right factions that, outside of, the more institutional people like the Claremonters, the post-liberals, or the NatCons, these two hard right factions, America First Groypers and the Nietzscheans, the BAP and Rog nationalists, the reason why they have so much beef is because they are in competition for who will dominate the future of the movement, who will dominate the post-Trump right. Now, here's what's interesting. The reason, and I'll tell you guys where Vrillium comes into all this, but the reason why these BAP-Sphere guys dislike the America Firsters so much is because it's for a few reasons. I'll go through some of them. The first one is they think Nick Fuentes is very high risk. They think he's very reactionary, he's very inflammatory, he's very polemical, and they think that post-January 6th, he may have ties to law enforcement. So they see him as being very high risk. The second thing is they think he's intellectually shallow. He's an entertainer. He hasn't written any books. He doesn't have like a deep philosophical foundation. He's very memeable. He's very, bombastic. He doesn't have like a deep, serious philosophical foundation. So that's the second reason why they don't take him seriously. He's very reactionary. He also leans into a lot of grievance. That's the second reason why they don't like him. The third reason they don't like him is because he's a Christian, or a Catholic to be specific. And you have to consider this. The BAP-Sphere and the Rog nationalist guys dislike Christianity because they see it as promoting a slave morality. So if your whole entire worldview is based on like this Carl Schmitt, the powerful must subordinate the weak, this kind of Nietzschean, unconstrained, elitist worldview, then of course you will see Christianity, which is a religion that emphasizes the meek and protection of the innocent, as cowardly, as weak, as restraining the potential of the most elite men in society. So that's another reason why they don't like Fuentes, because he's a Christian. The fourth reason is because they think that everything Nick Fuentes represents is synonymous with the downfall of civilization, or the decay of civilization. They think that Nick Fuentes leans way too much into grievance, he leans way too much into resentment, and those things corrode vitality. Those things make you weaker. Those things make you more cynical. Those things make you more pessimistic. Those things make you more gullible. And they make you more neurotic. And they believe that being stoic, being strong, being elite can only be achieved if you have an inner locus of control, a more elitist mindset. So they don't like how much he leans into grievance. Nick Fuentes leans into the whole loser, incel, disaffected young white guy archetype that they think is repulsive and they think is emblematic of the downfall of civilization. That's the fourth reason they don't like him. And the fifth one is because they think that he leans too much into populism. And for them, populism completely goes against their core ideology. And populism is for weak people, it's for crowds, it's for very emotional, resentful, bitter people. That's the fifth reason. Oh, and then the sixth one. The sixth one is these BAP, Rog nationalist guys. They see themselves as being elite. They think they should be underground. They should infiltrate the system, capture the institutions, capture the federal government, but do it in a stealth way. That's why you don't see BAP. That's why you don't see Captive Dreamer or Rog nationalists out here doing, live streams or speaking engagements. They're not giving speeches at Aspen or the Hudson Institute. They're very underground and they're very concealed in the way they move. They think that Nick Fuentes is way too out in the open, way too exposed. So those are basically the major reasons why they don't like Fuentes. Now, on the flip side, the reason why Fuentes does not like them is because Fuentes believes that they're elitist LARPers. He thinks that they spend way too much time pontificating on the internet. They don't get their message out there. They don't have enough numbers. They're not doing speaking engagements. They're not doing rallies. They're not like in the political world. It's all like this dark intellectual, like, very esoteric thing that they're doing. It's not serious. Nick Fuentes is doing the media circuit. He's on PBD. He's on Gavin McInnes. He's on Tucker Carlson. He's on Candace Owens. He's on Steven Crowder. These guys are operating in the dark, so he thinks that their operating procedure is a lot weaker. It's not as effective. So those are kind of the major reasons why Nick Fuentes doesn't like them. And then to add to that, he also thinks that this kind of Nietzschean, everything is about power, everything is about domination, this very like Carl Schmitt philosophy, everything is about survival and power and domination. He feels like that doesn't lead to striving to anything greater, not aspiring to anything greater. There's no spiritual root, there's no spiritual foundation there. It's very vapid. It's very weak. It's very shallow. And he believes that in order to strengthen a society, it needs to be held together by something deeper. It can't just be material. It has to focus on improving the human condition. And which I actually agree with, funnily enough. I think that humans need something to aspire to. I don't think you can satisfy humans with just material accomplishments or material improvements. This is the reason why I think Marxism and communism is truly a failed ideology and will continue to fail and will die within the next 1 or 2 centuries, maybe even sooner than that. And religions will continue to exist for the next 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, assuming nothing crazy happens. So, that's the whole thing for me. I agree with Nick on some level. You do have to have something deeper, something that emphasizes the human condition. Marxism is very material, it's very analytical, it's very mechanical, whereas something like Christianity gives you something to aspire to, a deeper meaning. It gives you a sense of right and wrong in life. It gives you something to strive for. The same is true of Islam, the same is true of Hinduism, the same is true of Judaism, the same is true of most world religions. It gives you something to strive for. It gives you a deeper sense of meaning in life about the human condition and about your suffering. And there's something missing from the Nietzschean philosophy. So I agree with what Nick is saying on that note. But anyways, these are the major beefs. And so the reason I bring all that up is because there are rumors and theories being floated on Twitter that the people who are most responsible for exposing everything that Vrillium did, all these nudes from the past, all the weird stuff that he said on the internet, his ex-Twitter account, everything, these cross-dressing photos that he took of himself, these weird thirst trap videos. There are people speculating that those videos were not just revealed, but also amplified by people in the BAP-Sphere. And of course, the BAP-Sphere, as I just explained, has major beefs with Nick Fuentes and the America First Sphere. And because Vrillium is associated with Nick Fuentes, and I said this earlier in the video, there's videos of him from like 2 or 3 weeks ago where he's in New York City at the Young Republicans conference shaking hands with Nick Fuentes. Because he gets a lot of his values, a lot of his ideas, a lot of his worldview, a lot of his talking points from Nick Fuentes, and he's also a Christian, and he's a reactionary, because he is seen, even if he doesn't have personal beef with BAP or with Raw Egg Nationalist, because he is seen as being associated with Nick Fuentes, they view him as guilty by association. And so they come up with all this dirt to basically ruin this guy's reputation, attack his identity, make him look horrible. And it's kind of like a proxy to get at Nick Fuentes. It's like this Twitter online beef, this war that's going on between these two different factions. So that's kind of the second thing I wanted to talk about. This this underbelly, this kind of the underpinning of this beef. Because, like I said, with Vrillium, he's not that interesting. He's just one character. He's just one pawn on the chessboard. But all these sorts of things make the Nick Fuentes Groyper, coalition look bad. People like that make it look bad. And people have been throwing shots at Nick Fuentes a lot over the past few months, bringing up his old videos, talking about how all the Groypers are brown. Now you got this guy, and they're saying all these guys are secretly gay. So anyways, that's the beef. That's all the drama. Thought it was interesting. I thought I wanted to, well, I thought it would be interesting to give you guys some context on this, give you guys my thoughts, and just, make something a little bit different. Thought it would be an interesting subject to go over. So, anyways, those are all my thoughts on Vrillium, on the future of this right wing movement. I'm totally tapped out. I like some of the post liberal ideas, I like some of the NatCon ideas, but that's about it. Fundamentally, I'm still very liberal. Fundamentally, I'm still very pro liberal democracy. I'm still I mean, I'm very pro egalitarian, generally speaking. But I do agree that we do need something more robust than this kind of liberal individualism. And if there are people who have valuable answers to some of the failures or shortcomings of this liberal individualist culture that we have, I'm willing to hear them out, even if it's someone who's a Catholic or somebody who's a national conservative. I'm willing to hear them out. I'm genuinely curious. But a lot of this more Nietzschean, a lot of this ultra reactionary Nick Fuentes stuff, I'm not even interested in any of that. But, anyways, that's all I have to say about this subject. I appreciate you guys for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. And until further ado, I'm out.